Hello, I'm Anna. Today is May 23rd. The war between the United States and Iran has not officially ended. Following the April 8 ceasefire and the collapse of talks in Islamabad on April 11 to 12, Washington and Tehran continued exchanging proposals through Pakistani intermediaries. On April 28, Iran submitted a 14-point counterproposal calling for a permanent end to hostilities within 30 days, a U.S. withdrawal from areas near its borders, the lifting of the U.S. naval blockade, the release of frozen assets, war reparations, and a new mechanism governing the Strait of Hormuz. Nuclear issues were explicitly excluded. One Iranian official has suggested there has been $270 billion in direct and indirect damages within Iran, and said that the issue of compensation, including from Gulf states, had been raised with mediators. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has said that the payment of reparations is the only way to end the conflict. Iran is also seeking the release of frozen state funds and assets held by the U.S. Washington's position remains far apart. Washington responded in early May with its own plan, whose central demands included a 20-year moratorium on uranium enrichment, the transfer abroad of Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium, estimated at roughly 400 kilograms enriched to 60%, and the dismantling of nuclear facilities. The Iranian proposal would bypass the nuclear issue entirely, reopening the Strait of Hormuz and ending the war first, with nuclear negotiations postponed for a later stage. But lifting the blockade and ending the war would remove President Trump's leverage in any future talks. Removing Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium and convincing Tehran to suspend enrichment are two primary war objectives for Trump. The bottom line, a 60-day ceasefire extension is being discussed, both sides remain at the table, and the strait, the artery through which 20% of the world's oil flows, remains the central bargaining chip. Neither side has walked away. Neither side has given ground. The Cuba pressure campaign, meanwhile, added another chapter this week, and it's personal. Audis Lastres Morera, the sister of Anya Guillermina Lastres Morera, the executive president of Cuba's Gaza military conglomerate, was arrested by ICE Homeland Security Investigations agents in Miami. ICE said that her permanent residency status had been revoked by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Rubio terminated her lawful permanent resident status under a provision of the Immigration and Nationality Act that makes non-citizens deportable if the Secretary of State believes their presence or activities in the United States would have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences. HSI Acting Executive Associate Director John Condon stated that Gaza, controlled by the Cuban military, is central to the country's communist kleptocracy, managing up to $20 billion in illicit assets. Allowing Lastres Morera to remain would signal that Cuban regime-affiliated networks could access U.S. financial, educational, and social systems. Rubio said, for far too long, the family members of sanctioned organizations, repressive anti-American regimes and other bad actors who would threaten the national security of the United States have been given a free pass to enjoy the privileges of living in the United States. No longer. CASTRO indicted. Nimitz deployed. Now a Gaza insider arrested in Florida. The pattern is deliberate and the direction is clear. Then there's a story that reads like a movie, except it's real, and it happened this week off the California coast. A Filipino man is facing federal charges in Los Angeles for allegedly smuggling 500 pounds of cocaine on an oil tanker inbound from Ecuador to El Segundo, narcotics intended for a Mexican drug cartel. The crude oil tanker Aquatrevisia, a 133,000 deadweight-ton vessel, had departed Ecuador on May 8. Crew members found multiple packages hidden in the ship's garbage room. The captain was alerted, secured the packages, and notified U.S. authorities. After interviewing the crew, the captain identified a 43-year-old Filipino worker, Cesar Tubay Galacio, who confessed to possessing the drugs. What happened next is the part that matters. The captain was informed that small naval crafts carrying armed cartel members would be waiting approximately 80 nautical miles off the coast of Mexico on the night of May 14 and early May 15 to retrieve the cocaine shipment. If the drugs were not delivered at this time, additional crafts would be waiting in Mexican waters to board the oil tanker and recover the contraband, prosecutors said. The captain informed U.S. authorities that he believed the vessel was receiving radio calls from the cartel attempting to hail the ship, and he feared the cartel planned to board or take over the tanker. Law enforcement directed the Aquatravesia to proceed to the port of Los Angeles, where it anchored on Thursday, May 21. Agents then boarded the tanker. The seized cocaine, weighing 500 pounds, was valued at approximately $6.4 million. Gelatio was arrested and is charged with importation of a controlled substance. If convicted, he faces a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years in federal prison and a statutory maximum of life.